Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Let's go. It's a Thursday edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. The show, as always, is brought to you by Betano. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk, and he is not Frank Saravalli. He is my fill-in co-host, Colby Cohen. Colby, what's up?
I know why you're in a good mood today, Tyler. We won't take long to get there.
Everyone in Edmonton waking up feeling good today. So yes, let's not waste any time, Colby. Let's dig into our first topic. Are the Edmonton Oilers back? As you know, I host an everyday Oilers show, and I've been telling people for well over a month now, I will not say the Oilers are back until they have won 5 consecutive games. Well, lo and behold, the Edmonton Oilers are on a 5-game winning streak after dismantling the Carolina Hurricanes last night. This team looks like they're humming, Colby. They look like the Oilers of old.
Yes, they sure do. Their power play has been absolutely dominant in this stretch. Their best players not only have been their best players, but they've been the best players in the NHL. Connor McDavid has reeled off 16 points in the last 5 games. That is quite a large size number. But at the end of the day, when you watch the way that they're playing, Tyler, to me, they're just playing a lot more thorough with the puck. They look like they have a little bit of that playoff identity back where it's not constant 2-on-1s. It's not constant 3-on-1s. You're not seeing unnecessary pinches by the defensive core. I think Stuart Skinner's played well over this stretch, but I don't think he's been put under the constant duress that we saw with careless turnovers, in those areas of the blue lines and the red lines early in this season. And, you and I like to text during the Oilers games, mostly me just texting you and you ignoring me. But what I said to you was a couple weeks ago is you cannot climb out of a hole without reeling off large numbers of wins in a row. You can't win 2 and lose 1. You can't do the 1-and-1 thing. You've got to reel off major chunks to start climbing up the standings. And hey, got to give credit where credit's due. The Oilers, to me, look like they are back. They look like a playoff team. And I ultimately believe they will get themselves back into the top 3 in their division.
Yeah, you mentioned just preventing scoring chances, how much different this blue line is playing. They are 11th over the course of this winning streak, I should say, 11th best in the NHL in preventing shots at 5-on-5, 6th best in the NHL at preventing scoring chances against at 5-on-5. So things have definitely turned around under Chris Knobloch. The Oilers still not quite out of the darkness yet. They're still quite a ways away out of a playoff spot. But one thing that is going to help them if they're going to continue this push is the fact that Connor McDavid is looking like the Connor McDavid we all know and love. I mean, early on this season, he was banged up. Frank Saravalli said today on the DFO rundown that there were some people in the organization who said he was only around 55% for a stretch in October and November. He's back to 100%, and he's back to being unstoppable.
Yeah, and do you think Paul Coffey has anything to do with this? On the TNT broadcast last night, obviously in the United States, they interviewed Paul Coffey before the game. I watched Paul Coffey play for the Flyers growing up. I didn't know a whole lot about him as a person. I've heard he can be a little bit of a hard ass, and you could just watch his interview. He's, he doesn't have a ton to say. He's not got this like big booming voice. He's almost a little more quiet, but listening to him talk about the relationship building with the defensive core, listening to him talk about making sure those players feel like he has their back, I think that's translated. I think when you have a guy like Paul Coffey that we all watched growing up there for you in your corner, I think that gives you more confidence. And I think we've seen a better Ekholm. I think we've seen a better Bouchard, a better Nurse. And I think that goes right on through the decor. So we talk a lot about Knobloch, but I think Paul Coffey deserves a little bit of praise here as well, coaching the D on the Oilers bench.
Yeah, big time. I think when you listen to how some of these defensemen have been talking about Paul Coffey's impact, it's been rave reviews, and it's a move that I kind of criticized at first. I was like, listen, this guy doesn't have coaching experience. What are we doing here? It felt like he was sent in almost to be some sort of a spy for ownership, but he's coming and made a big impact, and he's rocking the Stanley Cup ring on the bench. His presence is legit. Let's talk a little bit about the wild card race, though, Colby. We're going to go through the East in a bit, but we'll stick in the Western Conference for now. It's getting tight, and it's largely a product of mediocrity. You can see not a lot of these teams, no one in the wild card race is humming at a 600 points percentage or better. It's kind of the battle of mid, as the kids like to say on Twitter. We'll do one contender and one pretender. Let's start. Which team in this group, and maybe we'll exclude the Oilers, do you look at and go, they're actually a contender? Like, I don't just like them as a playoff team. I think they can be a team that eventually, by the end of the year, is ready to take a run.
Yeah, so let's take the Oilers right out of it, because I think the Oilers push Vancouver out of their spot, and I think they become a top 3 team in the division. If you're looking at the group we just there, to me, it's probably the Wild. I think under John Hines, this team has defended so much harder. He's come in, they're on a 4-game win streak. We just talked about this with the Oilers. If you're going to climb out, you need to reel off wins. I played for John Hines. I know what he's like to play for. Very detailed, very structured. They block a lot of shots, his team. So, the Nashville Predators under John Hines, they never had a lot of firepower, but they always were in every game. They were always tight, 2-1, 1-1, overtime games. So I think under John Hines, that Minnesota Wild team is going to get going. I think they're going to defend better. They're going to protect the house. And then ultimately, Kaprizov and Boldy, like, these guys are going to score. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So to me, those guys are a serious contender. And if we're going to look the other way at pretender, I'm still not sold on the Coyotes. I'm just not. I can't. I just can't. I can't give them the love yet. I'm sorry. I think right now they're playing with house money. I think teams take them lightly. I think teams are going in there, getting that Roxy flu we used to see out in Vancouver. Now they're getting it in Old Town Scottsdale. So ultimately, I don't think when this all shakes out, I don't think the Arizona Coyotes are sitting in a playoff spot.
I will give you a different pretender, because I agree. I don't think the Yotes are going to get into a playoff spot, but I think they're going to be in the hunt for the bulk of the season. Like, they also have 24 games, right? They're sitting in that top spot with a game in hand on pretty much everyone in those spots below them. A couple of pretenders for me. I don't think Nashville has enough to stay in this race. I think they're being dragged a little bit by UC Saros. And I know that, again, you look at these numbers, 3.2 goals against per game is high. I know Saros has been a little inconsistent, and maybe I shouldn't phrase it that way. I should say they're only going to stay in this if UC Saros drags them. I think the offensive production is a little bit unsustainable in Nashville. They had that big heater. It was great. They're still 8-2 in their last 10. Fantastic. I don't think this team has the offensive depth to keep scoring north of 3 goals per game.
Don't underestimate Andrew Burnett, though. We saw what he did when he was the head coach during the regular season in Florida, when he took over for Joel Quenneville. You see the way his teams go north-south. Burnett had a lot to do with the success in New Jersey last year. He really did. Nobody talked about that. But you look at the way those teams were buzzing around. You think back to the way Andrew Burnett played. I don't think he gets enough credit, but I do agree with you. I think at the end of the day, that team's just not built well enough to continue to score, and I don't think they defend well enough either. I think I'm in lockstep with you. I think UC Saros is dragging them along.
Yeah, and we'll see if that continues and if the Preds can stay in the hunt a little bit here. But again, like, if we just looked at the standings, it's incredibly tight. The gap from Arizona in that top wildcard spot to, if you even want to do Edmonton, it's pretty small. It's 7 points, but the Oilers, again, have games in hand on, or they do have games in hand on every team in front of them. So they should tighten up that gap a little bit too. Like, we could be at a point a week from now where the difference between Arizona and whoever's in that Edmonton spot, 5 out of the wild card, like, they're going to be sitting. It might be a 5-point gap separating that, which is crazy.
It looks like the East as we start to transition our way to the East. I mean, you look at the race in the East, Tyler. It's very similar. The teams are all junked up. There's definitely some, different contender-pretender scenarios. So let's start with you. What do you think about the East? How do you see that shaking out?
Well, I'll give you a pretender, and I think the pretender is the New York Islanders. They're sitting 1 spot behind Toronto right now, but I don't think this team is going to be able to stay in the race for that much longer. Again, being propped up by a whole boatload of overtime losses. They only have 10 wins in 24 games this year. And I think you can look at the Lightning, who again are kind of similar. They're being propped up by some OT losses. But you can look at the Bolts and go, Vasilevsky's going to hit his groove right away. Kucherov is still elite. There's so much talent there that even if they're not playing at their best, that's a team that can just kind of flip the switch at some point. The Islanders don't have that. They have a slow aging forward group outside of Barzal and Horvat, I guess. They have a blue line that's banged up. And similar to Nashville, unless Sorokin's just going to do it all, the Islanders are going to be sitting closer to Columbus than they are to Toronto by the All-Star break.
We're on the same page. I do. I know the Flyers right now are not fighting for a wild card. They're in that top 3 in the division, but I'm going to go with the Flyers because I do not see the Flyers as a team that are making the playoffs this year. And when I look at the East right now, and I look at Vasilevsky the last couple of nights, he was like, 30, 40 seconds away from back-to-back shutouts. After the team got absolutely lit up on the first half of the home and home. I think they lose 8-1 to Dallas. I mean, how many times have they given up 8 goals in the last 4 or 5 years? It's probably counted on one hand. But I think the East playoff picture is a little more set. And I think the only team that is not currently in a playoff position in the East I don't think the Flyers go in. So then I think you look at some of those teams, whether it's the Islanders, which you and I agree, we don't see them as a playoff team. So then it's Jersey. Then it's the Capitals. Really, who's going to emerge out of that group? Look, I don't love the way Jersey's playing. They just lost Dougie Hamilton to a torn pectoral out indefinitely. I look at their D-core, and while I do really like John Marino, I think their D-core and their goaltending is a little bit of a problem. So I might be leaning a little more to the Caps and thinking maybe the Caps end up sneaking their way into that Metro spot, and then the Atlantic occupies both of the wild card spots. But I just think 7 of the 8 teams in the East that are currently in playoff spots, Tyler, I think those teams will all be in the playoffs when we start.
So where do you come out on the Pittsburgh Penguins? We're looking at a team that just did the whole closed door meeting after another tough loss yesterday. I think if you would have told Penguins fans at the beginning of the year, hey, it'll be December 7th. Carlson has 19 points in 25 games. Sidney Crosby scoring at a 50-goal pace. Tristan Jarry's got a 917. They'd probably be sitting there going, whoa, are we winning the division? Are we Stanley Cup favorites? But it's not the case. They've looked incredibly mediocre. Their power play has been absolutely flat. I think it's like 0 for 30 something right now.
Yeah.
Do Crosby and company have the ability to turn this thing around?
I mean, look, Crosby is playing like he's 25 years old. You cannot
Unreal.
overlook what this guy continues to do. Every time new superstars come into this league, I feel like Sidney Crosby says, hold on. I'm still 87 here, okay? I still have multiple Stanley Cups. Let's not forget about me. I loved what Ovechkin said about the two of them really propping the league up all those years ago. I think they were spot on with that. But at the end of the day, I think Pittsburgh's too slow. I just do. I don't see a team that plays with enough pace. Their power play, is it going to get going? Yeah, you look at the personnel, it should. But 0 for 31 with that type of talent, I don't know. I'm not buying on the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't think that they have enough team speed. I do think they're well coached. I do think they're going to get every ounce they can out of some of these veteran players. But ultimately, I don't like the mix, and I don't see them as a playoff team.
Man, that'll be tough. I mean, in Kyle Dubas's first year to go give up what you did, to go make the splash of bringing in Carlson, and not even so much give up what you did from an asset standpoint, but give up what you did from a flexibility standpoint. You are locked in with this aging core, right? Letang is there until he's in his 40s. Carlson is there long-term still. Crosby, Malkin, those guys obviously aren't going anywhere. You just sit there and go, if it's not going to work this year, where's the reason to believe it's going to get better next year?
Yeah, I don't think it will. And I think you'll see one of those couple of guys that you just mentioned playing for the next expansion team whenever that happens over the next couple of years, because they got problems. Like, I didn't agree with the moves that they made. I think Kyle Dubas is a smart guy. I think Fenway Sports Group is a phenomenal ownership group. I've had a chance to meet some of their executives in Boston over the years via the Red Sox. There was a lot of synergy between, BU and the Red Sox and the Bruins and the Red Sox. They're phenomenal people. They invest in their teams. But I think there's trouble there. I think they might be a little too in love with some of those names as coming from the outside looking in. You thought maybe this was an opportunity to just kind of, start fresh. But I don't know. Like, I think trouble in Pittsburgh ahead. I don't see bright days. I see dark days.
All right, I know we got to get to Stephen Ellis in a second with the next wave, but tonight's schedule will feature one game that should have everyone's eyes on it. It's Showtime in Hockeytown. Patrick Kane will make his debut for the Detroit Red Wings this evening. You're taking a look at his numbers from last season with the New York Rangers when he hopped over 12 points in 19 games. What are you expecting out of Patty Kane in a Wings jersey? Do you think that with that surgery behind him, he's presumably back to 100% healthy? Do you think we're getting point per game Patty Kane, or maybe a step down?
I don't think you're going to get point per game Patty Kane tonight. But I think within 2 months, I think you're getting point per game Patty Kane. Listen, I watched this guy very closely the last couple of years in Chicago, having been between the benches and spending half the game literally sitting right next to him. So what this guy has done on one hip, it's incredible. Like his hockey IQ, it's as high as anybody's in the National Hockey League. So I think it's going to take him a little bit of time. I think as long as he has that lateral movement, that's what it's all about. He plays the game very lateral. It's not a lot of north-south for Patrick Kane. It's a lot of lateral hockey. I think the comfort of DeBrincat, the power play, I think those are areas where he'll build confidence. But, I started looking at the lineup on Daily Faceoff, which I know that we flashed already. You look at that group with Patrick Kane, he kind of solidifies that forward group. He pushes Perron into that third line. Now you have Rasmussen, Kopp, and Perron on the third line. Like that's a really, really quality top nine. I mean, and then you've got a fourth line that does a little bit of everything, can play with speed, can check, can kill penalties. If Kaner can get himself within the next couple of months up to 100%, this is a tougher team. Like I doubted these guys. I really did. A couple months ago, I didn't see this coming, but I expect we'll see Kane go like this over the next couple of weeks. It'll go like this.
Okay. One other number I'll be keeping an eye on. The Red Wings, their power play ranks 20th in the NHL right now. We'll see if Kane can give them a boost there. If you look back at the Rangers last year, they were 11th in power play percentage, 22% before getting Kane, jumped up to 4th in the league, 28% after getting Kane at the deadline. So maybe a spot where Kane can give the Red Wings a bit of a spark on the special teams. It is December 7th. World Junior Camps are underway. We're only 2-3 weeks away from Christmas and Boxing Day and the start of the World Juniors in Sweden. So let's dig into it with the next wave. The next wave is delivered by DoorDash, where for a limited time, our Canadian listeners can get 25% off and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. All you need to do, download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code NATION25. Make DoorDash your holiday hack this holiday season. Stephen Ellis, welcome back for another edition of The Next Wave. And let's dig in to a little World Junior talk. Last week on the show, you told us Canada was getting set for camp. You gave us some insight into their roster. Now that things are finalized in terms of their camp invites, who are you looking to maybe make a little bit of noise here at training camp for Team Canada?
Well, I'm excited to be going out there in person in a couple of days to watch Canada train. But the one player I'm watching for sure is Jordan Dumais, who last year had 140 points with the Halifax Mooseheads of the QMJHL. Only one player in the entire CHL had more points than him, and that was Connor Bedard. I'd say he's a pretty good player. This year, he had a bit of an injury to start the year. He's having a bit of an off year. He's only on pace for 130 points this year. I know, kind of rough. But like the numbers we've seen from his junior career, he had 109 points in his draft year in 2022. 140, and again, on pace for 130 this year. For a guy who was drafted 96th overall by the Columbus Blue Jackets, it's shocking how good he's ended up becoming. He's a bit of a smaller player. He's only 5'9", and that does show from time to time, including last year when he wasn't on the final World Junior team. But this year, especially with the NHL guys not showing up, like Zach Benson, Matt Poitras, Connor Bedard, obviously, I think he's going to play a pretty big role. So Columbus Blue Jackets prospect that I hope sticks with his number if he plays in the NHL. He wore 69 in the preseason. I hope that stays.
All right, I'm going to make you think a little bit back to the last couple of gold medal teams for Team Canada. When you look at those teams and you look at who you think will be on this year's team, how do they compare?
It's a bit of a step down for Canada, unfortunately, if you're a Canadian fan. And that's, if all of their available players were to show up, and let's just exclude Bedard because he was never going to come back. But let's say Fantilli came back. Let's say Poitras. Let's say Korchinski. This team would be the best team in the tournament by far. So it's not going to be as strong. I think the big question here is who's going to be their goalie. Mathis Rousseau is a goalie that I'm really excited to see play. He's a smaller goalie, 5'11", out of the QMJHL. Halifax, of course, because half this team is from Halifax, it seems like. But he's putting up some great numbers, one of the best goalies in the CHL. There's also Dominic DeVincentis, Winnipeg Jets prospect, who last year, best goalie in the OHL by quite a bit. This year, not having the same year. He got injured. He just hasn't played as good. So there's some question marks in net. But if there's anything that this team will have, it's speed and hard workers. And on the blue line, there's a couple 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" defensemen, and then Maverick Lamoureux is 6'7". So they will be a difficult team to play against. But I think the biggest question is who's going to be that guy that takes this team forward. Maybe that's Macklin Celebrini. Maybe it's Jordan Dumais. Maybe it's Matt Savoy. I'm not sure yet, so we'll have to see.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Macklin Celebrini. Let's go across the pond let's go across the border and talk about Team USA. Other than Lane Hudson, a guy that I know I'm looking forward to watching play, Macklin Celebrini's teammate, those two have certainly tore it up to start the NCAA season. But tell us a little bit about Team USA's camp. Any names that you're keeping an eye on? Any big camp battles? Any players maybe omitted from Team USA? Give us the skinny.
Yeah, the American team is the one that I'm excited to see the most. And I think it's just because there's so much depth at every position, especially in net, where you're looking at Trey Augustine versus Jacob Fowler. So Augustine is a top 10 goalie prospect right now, a Detroit Red Wings pick. Look at his record, 9-3-2. Very good numbers. And that's a downgrade from his last couple of years in the U.S. National Development Team, where I think last year he had like 1 or 2 losses all year long across all events. It was unbelievable how good he was. He was the starting goalie for the World Junior team at 17, which is pretty hard to believe. But Jacob Fowler, you look at those numbers, and they're better this year. He's playing such an important role for the Eagles this year in the NCAA. Just a big goalie, takes the net over. Good head on his shoulders, doesn't let a bad goal really screw him up there. And I know Montreal Canadiens fans are really excited about him. I think Augustine's going to get the start. The first starts of the tournament, just because he's the guy that is returning. Fowler does have a history with USA Hockey. He was very good at the World Junior Summer Showcase, and I expect him to play well. In terms of other guys to watch, obviously the one player I was shocked that didn't make it was Quentin Musty, playing at 2 points per game with the Sudbury Wolves. He's tenacious. He's a lot of fun to watch. And then there's Cole Iserman. I did not have Iserman making the World Junior team, and I think part of that is, for as good of a player as he is, and you've obviously know a bit about him there, Colby. He's a great shot. He could shoot from anywhere, but I'm not sure he was going to fit in a bottom 6 role. And I think that was the concern there of all the scoring options, that he was going to get pushed out. So it's too bad we won't even get to see him at camp, but I think fans will get to see just how good James Haggins is. And I think that's really cool, because Haggins is, Jack Hughes light in a way.
Canada should be competitive. USA should be competitive. They always are. Give me another team who you're looking at in the early stages here and circling them, going, they're going to be a good team too.
Well, it's always easy to bet on Sweden being a competitive team, but if you bet on them winning gold in the last 15 years, you would have lost a lot of money. But for me, the team at home, probably they're not going to have Leo Carlsson, but they don't need him. You've got guys like Jonathan Lekaramaki, the Vancouver Canucks prospect, who looks unbelievable right now. Liam Ogren, Noah Olsland, those guys all played together last year in the Allsvenskan League, and they also have a lot of experience playing just with Sweden's national team in general. But I put together my preview for the team. It's coming out next Tuesday, and it's like every line could do some damage. I think the one question mark for me is, again, goaltending. They've got 3 goalies. Hugo Havelid is probably going to be the starting goalie. And of those 3, he's the one that isn't drafted, but he's 5'10", so he's not big, but he plays a lot bigger in the net. He really just takes up a lot of space, the way he kind of moves his arms around, uses his glove. I know scouts really like him, but they know that the size is a problem. But I think if he can really hold it together, this team's got the defensive depth and the scoring depth to really be a serious contender for the United States to win gold there.
Where does Tom Willander fit in, the Vancouver first-round pick? Is he a guy that you expect to have a big tournament for Sweden?
I do. He's a guy that can be hit or miss. Last year, watching him with the World Junior A Challenge was kind of what really opened my eyes for how good of a puck mover he is. He kind of reminds me a bit of Eric Brandstrom when he was at the same age. And now, I hope he has a better career than Brandstrom's had at this point. But when it comes to what Brandstrom was doing at this tournament, just rushing the puck, playing such a dominant two-way game. And I think that, with the way Willander's been playing this year in college, I think he's going to really turn some heads. I know a lot of scouts weren't convinced he was going to play a big role, but I think he will, just because he's the guy that could generate a lot of those chances, play the power play, and do so much for that group.
Love it, Steven. Look forward to your coverage of the tournament in a few weeks on dailyfaceoff.com. Thanks for doing this, and we'll chat again next week.
Thanks so much.
Moving along to our daily face-off inbox question, hashtag AskDFO. We got one in here centered around the holidays, Colby. Pass or fail on eggnog?
I'm a new to the eggnog world, so it just depends on how heavy my father-in-law makes it. I'll go pass.
Yeah, I think I'm more on the pass side as well. I mean, maybe one, but that's it. I don't really love the whole idea of getting drunk off a heavy dairy product.
Yeah, we didn't grow up with eggnog in our house. We lit the menorah, we spun the dreidel. There was no eggnog in the Cohen residence.
We also got another one in here too, and I've totally lost who asked it, so my apologies. But in the YouTube, someone said, which team is most likely to make a trade before the roster freeze in a couple of weeks? I'll take an easy one off the board, Colby. It's got to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, we're looking at a blue line. Riley, Brody, okay, that's good. William Lagesson on your second pair. Connor Timmins playing with Simone Benoit. Ooh, it's thin on that Leafs blue line. I'll say Toronto needs to make a deal in the next couple of weeks. Is there another team that stands out for you?
It's exactly where my brain went. It was right to Toronto because they need to get a defenseman in there, and they need to get a defenseman in quick. The closer you get to the deadline, the closer you get to the end of the season, the higher the price tag goes up. I wouldn't waste any time if I was Brad Treveling.
Tree Living.
Tree Living. Oh, I thought I got it. See, Frank's in my head. Frank's in my head.
And I knew Frank would get mad if I didn't correct you on it and call you out a little bit on that.
You need to, because I've said that guy's name 17 different ways, and I'm sitting in my office right now, and he's running an NHL team. He deserves to have his name said right.
Let's move along to our Betano daily bets. I was a perfect 2-0 yesterday with the shot prop parlay, and the Golden Knights covering the puck line, so we'll look to keep the magic rolling this evening. Colby, William Nylander has not scored in 5 straight games. He was off to a hell of a start this season, and that little cold streak he's going through, it's causing his price to get back to a decent point. You're getting plus money on William Nylander to find the back of the net. It should be a high-scoring game against Ottawa. I like the Leafs offense in this matchup. Give me the man they call Willie Styles to find the back of the net there. And also the over between San Jose and Detroit. A couple of numbers for you here. The overs hit in back-to-back games for Detroit with a total of 8.5 goals on average in those games. For San Jose, the overs hit in 3 straight with 29 total goals in those last 3 games, almost 10 per game. This line is 6.5. I like the number at minus 118. I was expecting it to be like minus 135. So I like the price point on the over between San Jose and Detroit as Patty Kane makes his debut there. Let's wrap up with a little bit of garbage time. It is brought to you by our Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor game, where you can win real prizes from our friends at Wendy's, like the Syrup Dipidus combo, their limited edition chicken strips and French toast sticks. Order today from Wendy's and on the Wendy's app. Colby, I know you hate garbage time, so I got this. Don't worry. Last night on the bench in Edmonton, Rod Brindamore had to do his stand-up in-play interview, whatever you want to call it, with Darren Pang, and he delivered as his team was struggling.
We're losing 50-0 right now. I've never seen our team playing this brutal. So at this point, I don't really. I'm lost for words, to be quite honest. We weren't ready to start, which was clear, and now we're just kind of doing things not the way we do it, and this is what you get. So at this point, we're probably turning the page.
Well, thanks for doing this. I know it's not easy.
I like how he is walking away before Darren Pang can even give the follow-up. He's like, I'm done.
So it's funny. I grew up watching Rod Brindamore play here in Philadelphia, and this is probably about 5 years ago. I'm doing a game that his son is playing in for Quinnipiac against UConn. And after the game, I get in the car, heading down the turnpike back to Philadelphia. And I'm in the rest area, just figured it's late, it's 10 p.m., let me go to the bathroom, whatever. I'm standing there going to the bathroom. Standing directly next to me is Rod Brindamore. He was there watching his kid play. I think they played the Flyers the next night. So I waited for him to finish, and then I had to introduce myself, and I'll never forget it because I said to him, I went to introduce myself to him, and he said, "Hey, Colby, what's going on?" Like, he knew who I was from doing TV. Obviously, I thought it was cool to get a chance to meet him. We sat, I sat there with him and had a coffee in the rest stop at 10 p.m. Such an intense guy, but such a great, great guy. I mean, when you hear about hockey players being unbelievably good dudes, Rod Brindamore is one of them. So I hope the Hurricanes can have a little bit of a bounce back there. I like to see him succeed and his teams do well.
Yeah, he's been, for a guy who just jumped right into coaching. I mean, unbelievable what he's done in Carolina, and a nice chuckle with his frustration last night. They were like 10 minutes into the game, and he was like, yeah, I might as well pack it in. We're done. It's like, I love that honesty. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Colby and I will be back tomorrow for a Friday edition of things here on Daily Faceoff Live. We'll chat with you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.